Our reading this morning comes from Job chapter 4. This is one of Job's friends, and we're reading from Job chapter 4, verses 1 through 8. Job, will you be annoyed if I speak? I can't keep quiet any longer. You have taught many people and given strength to feeble hands. When someone stumbled, weak and tired, your words encouraged him to stand. Now it's your turn to be in trouble, and you are too stunned to face it. You worshiped God, and your life was blameless, and so you should have confidence and hope. Think back now. Name a single case where someone righteous met with disaster. I've seen people plow fields of evil and plant wickedness like seed. Now they harvest wickedness and evil. May God bless the reading of his word this morning.
Now, home is a lot of work, just plain work. When work at home is planned and organized for cooperation, there can usually be more time for leisure.
I'm certainly in favor of those things. Leisure, fun.
Who isn't?
Wouldn't we all be happier if we worked out a little system for living together in harmony?
But how can we manage them?
We'll have to work out the full answer together.
Say, Mom, you're swell.
Most family problems can be solved through frank and friendly discussion, which points the way to a happy family life.
You know, this is beginning to be quite a family project.
It certainly is.
All right, friends, we're going to see if we can save your mama from the drama here in this preaching series. Welcome to week 2. Today we're talking about everybody's favorite topic, anxiety. Say yay. Right, that's how anxiety sounds right there. Good. Once again, I'm inviting you to make use of our new discipleship tool. It's called Sermon Notes. And using Sermon Notes, you can take notes on the sermon. Isn't that a great name? So, 2 options, paper or electronic version. If you want a paper version, raise your hand right now. Our hospitality team will bring it to you. And what I want to ask you to do is start picking it up at the table in the back on your way in. But for today, we'll bring it to you. So just keep your hand up until we get it to you. The other option is electronic version. So go ahead and pull out your phone if you'd like to take notes today. Open the Church Center app. And you usually have to put your thumb. I have to put my thumb on there to prove it's me. And then it really is me. And then at the bottom right, there's a little tab that says More. I tap that, and then I get the center screen up here, and I get an option that says Sermon Notes. And I click Sermon Notes, and then it loads a page that looks like the page on the right-hand side, which is the page where I can add my sermon notes. I can go and click on the scripture reference from Job chapter 8, and it'll pull that up for me, and all kinds of great tools there for my study. Now, this is for you. I don't go back and read your notes or anything like that. This is for you, and you can have them emailed to yourself as a PDF or whatever. But please make use of that if you're inclined to do that. During this series, we're going to do quite a bit of teaching, and so today's no exception. And we're going to put a lot to you, and so I'd like you to please think about that with me, and maybe if writing it down helps you, then do that. So today we're talking about anxiety. Let me say a sort of a caveat. We're not talking so much about clinical, generalized anxiety disorder that you might be diagnosed with by a doctor or a clinical therapist, although that's related. What we're talking about really is the kind of anxiety, the kind of worry, the kind of fear that everybody has, that all of us experience when life is difficult or scary or when you go through a change or something in your life. And so if you do have what we might think of as more severe anxiety that's debilitating or prevents your successful participation in life, at work, and relationships, please, let me encourage you to talk to a doctor or talk to a mental health therapist or talk to a pastor. We'll be glad to connect you with resources. Let me say to you very clearly, it's okay to have Jesus and a therapist also. I believe Jesus uses therapists and doctors and all kinds of helpers to bless people, and so let us connect you with that kind of help if that's what you need. The kind of anxiety we're talking about today is characterized like this: biblical principles of family systems regarding anxiety. Number one, anxiety is a normal human reaction to a stressor. This is the way God made you, to fight or flight. That is how you keep safe when you meet a stranger in a dark alley or when a lion is chasing you across the savannah. You don't have to think about it. You just run for your life because your body tells you this is how you survive, right? That part is good. Here's the challenging part. When we live with that kind of anxiety, even when the danger's gone, that becomes very problematic. When we become afraid not of a lion, but of a person who's in your life or in your family or at your work, and they stir up anxiety for you, that's where this becomes a problem, okay? But anxiety at its base is a normal human reaction to a stressor. Secondly, even good changes can cause anxiety. How many of you have noticed even good changes cause anxiety? Raise your hand if you've noticed that. New baby, new job, new home, right? Even good changes can cause anxiety. That is part of it. And anxiety is what happens when anything, good or bad, upsets the delicate balance, the delicate equilibrium in your system. So when we say system, we mean the complex web of relationships that you are part of in your family, in your workplace, in your neighborhood, wherever it is that you have relationships with people. Think of that as a system. Okay? And the third reality is this: anxiety is shared in that system. God made you for relationship, right? God made you for relationship with your family, with your friends, and all of us are part of systems of families and of friends and of co-workers. Think about it like this. Imagine a herd of cows grazing in the field, and one of the cows gets too close to the electric fence, and there's a little zap, and the cow reacts, right? Like, roar, and maybe a little jump. And how long is it then before the other cows in the herd notice, and the anxiety from the one cow that got shocked then spreads, right, to the other cows. And now all the cows are on high alert because danger, danger. In humans, it works the same way, friends. When one person introduces anxiety into a system, it tends to spread and be shared around that system. Anxiety thrives in emotional systems. Now, a lot of people are wondering, where does anxiety come from? Where do we even get this? Well, social scientists have studied this for decades and finally come up with two primary sources, mostly in childhood. And the first occurs, this is back when your mom took you grocery shopping and you were standing at the checkout counter and you're putting all the things on the belt, and then your mom says to you, "Oh, hang on, sweetie, I need to go get one more thing." And then she runs into the store and she disappears from your sight. And here you are, a little kid, and you're putting the things on the belt, but now all the things are on the belt. And now it's time to pay. And where's mom? And so you just start taking packs of gum and adding packs of gum onto the conveyor belt. And the people behind you are getting impatient, and the cashier's looking at you like, "Are you going to pay, kid?" And inside you're screaming, "Mom, come back, please." So that's one source of anxiety. The other source of anxiety is from this game that we played in the 1980s. This game is part puzzle and part improvised explosives. Basically, what you do is you push that blue tray down and you turn the timer on and then click start. And there's this obnoxiously loud click, 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 click the whole time that you're trying to put all those yellow puzzle pieces into their exact slots where they belong. And if you don't do it by the time the timer runs out, bam! There's this explosion of yellow shrapnel all over your living room. And do you know what the name of this game is? This game, it's called perfection, which is just ridiculous, as if all the perfectionists needed one more reason to feel inadequate, right? Do this in time or else it will explode. So these are the two primary sources of anxiety in the human experience. No, but for real, let's talk about anxiety, and let's look at anxiety in the context of the story of Job. Pastor Jesse read for us from the story of Job, and Job is a long and a complicated story. It's in the Old Testament. I commend it to you sometime to read it. But what you need to know for today about the story of Job is basically Job was a guy, a regular guy, a farmer. He had a wife and family, and a lot of bad things happened to Job. He was suffering. He was going through trials. He was going through hardships in his life. And so there is stress in the system, right? There is anxiety in the system of Job's life because of these hard things he's gone through. Now, early on in the story, in the book of Job, the story goes that his friends came to be with him. Is that what we do for our friends when they're going through a hard time, right? You show up, maybe bring a casserole, and you pray for them, and you say, it's going to be all right, I'm with you, right? That's what Job's friends did for him. They came and they sat with him, and this is how the story goes in Job chapter 2. 3 of Job's friends heard how much Job had been suffering, and they decided to go and comfort him. When they saw Job, they began to weep and wail. So they're crying with him and for him because he's suffering so much. They're tearing their clothes in grief. That was a sort of Old Testament sign of the expression of grief, to rip your clothes, and then throwing dust on their heads, right? That's how sad, that's how grieved they are. Then they sat there on the ground with him for, 7 days and nights, without saying a word, because they saw how much he was suffering. Now, this is a common practice in Judaism. It's called sitting Shiva. And if someone experiences a death in their family, you go sit with them, and you don't say anything, and you minister to them by your presence, right? It's a way of saying, I'm here with you. You're not alone. We'll get through this together. And whatever anxiety is in the system at this time, notice the friends are able to absorb it. They're able to deflect it. They're able to live with it such that no one's getting worked up. Whatever anxiety Job has, whatever anxiety the friends have, it's not preventing them from ministering to their friend, right? It's not preventing them from sitting with their friend who needs their friendship and their companionship during this time. But eventually, the anxiety gets to be too much for them. Imagine like air going into a balloon. It's getting more and more tense. It's getting bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden, it comes out. And one of Job's friends speaks up. And so here we are, Job 4, verses 1 to 2. Job, will you be annoyed if I speak? I can't keep quiet any longer. Do you have any friends like that? They just can't help it. They got to say something. One of the ways that we deal with anxiety, friends, is by trying to relieve it. And one of the ways we try to relieve our anxiety is with the mouth, right? We say what's going on, and sometimes we almost can't help it. And this is understandable because anxiety feels bad, doesn't it? The lightheadedness, the nausea, the racing heart, the sense of doom all around you. Anxiety is a terrible feeling. So it's very understandable that we try to relieve the anxiety by speaking it. And Job's friends are going to now try to relieve their own anxiety by filling the silence. And it's too bad because they were doing so good, right? They were doing so good, sitting there quietly with him day after day after day, but now they talk. And notice, they're not really trying to relieve Job's anxiety. Whose anxiety are the friends trying to relieve? Their own. Their own. Okay, so if you can understand what I'm going to say here, friends, you will tremendously appreciate and grow in your appreciation of the human condition. And it is this. Almost always, people are more interested in relieving their own anxiety than they are in managing what's happening in the system. In your family, in your workplace, in this church, almost always, people are more interested in relieving their own anxiety than they are in managing the system or in concerning themselves with the experience of the other. In stressful situations, humans usually prefer peace over truth or justice. And I put peace in finger quotes because it's kind of a false peace, right? It's just, hey, nobody bring up anything sad, and let's just all try to get along, and maybe we can get through this. That is what anxiety sounds like when it is in the system. So Job's friends continue, verse 3 and 4 and 5. They said, you've taught many people and given strength to feeble hands. They're complimenting Job. When someone stumbled weak and tired, your words encouraged him to stand. Good job, Job. Then they said, now it's your turn to be in trouble, but you're too stunned to face it. Okay, what's wrong now? What are Job's friends? What sort of mistake are they stepping into now? Now they're trying to explain something that cannot be explained. Why is Job suffering? Well, it's just your turn, right? You ever heard the phrase comes around and goes around, right? We call that karma. The problem with that is, friends, the Bible does not believe in karma, right? Now, Job's friends believe in karma. Like, hey, man, you've had a good life. Now it's your turn to have a bad thing in life. That's not really how things work according to God's design, but that's what they're trying to do to explain what's happening, friends. Be cautious of anyone who can claim to understand and explain something that is inexplicable. Be careful about trying to explain why people you love are suffering, friends, because sometimes the answer is we don't know. And much better to say, I don't know, than to say something like this and mislead. Verse 6, you worship God and your life was blameless, so you should have confidence and hope. What's the worst word in this verse? Should. Here we are with the should again, right? They're shoulding all over Job. They're like, man, you should do this, you should do that. Says who? Have you ever had people use the word should on you? It's a bad feeling, isn't it? Do you understand what that is? That is us projecting our expectations onto someone else. This is what I think you need, and therefore, you go do that. But says who, right? So, friends, take care. Be cautious with this word. See if you can avoid the word should, because it will almost always end up in disappointment. They'll be disappointed, or you'll be disappointed, or maybe both. But notice that's a matter of our anxiety, right? If we can just manage or control people, if everybody around me will do what is pleasing to me, then maybe my anxiety can go down. But don't wait for someone else around you to do what you want them to do, because there's a good chance they won't, right? Verse 7 and 8. This is how the story finishes in this passage. Think back, Job. Name a single case when some righteous person met with disaster. I have seen people plow fields of evil and plant wickedness like seed. Now they harvest wickedness and evil. So what they're saying is, look, if you sow evil, you will get evil. And so there's no way in which you could be righteous, Job, if this is what you are experiencing. You must have done something wrong. You must have done something wrong. And so now another fruit of our anxiety is blaming. Someone must be at fault here, so let's blame Job. It must be his fault. He surely did something wrong to deserve all of this bad stuff. Notice, instead of looking inwardly, the friends are looking outward. They're finding someone to blame. Anxiety makes it so hard for us to be self-reflective. Anxiety makes it so hard for us to look honestly in the mirror at what is going on in our hearts and in our lives. Friends, part of growing up in Christ means we stop concerning ourselves so much with what other people may or may not have done wrong, and we let God do a good work of transformation in our souls so that we are becoming who God has called us to be. Change in the system introduces anxiety. Friends, this is a biblical perennial truth. Change in the system introduces anxiety. It's true in your family. Think about when your family has experienced change, when you moved or started a new job or you had a baby or someone you loved and your family died. It introduces anxiety into the family system. It's same is true with churches. We've been through a lot of changes in this church lately. Our dear Estelle Holt retired. We have disaffiliated from the United Methodist denomination. We changed the Sunday morning worship schedule. 3 big changes. It has introduced anxiety into the system. Think about this country as an emotional system. Notice the anxiety already in the system with the presidential election, and it's still more than a year away. But politicians are posturing, right? And people are arguing on social media and turn on political radio and you'll hear one rant or another. There's anxiety in the system. Friends, this is normal. This is what happens inside of systems. And small changes create small anxiety, and often big changes create big anxiety, right? Let's imagine you're floating in a pool and it's perfectly calm and someone drops a rubber ducky. Right? And there's teeny little ripples because it's a small duck. And you might not even notice it's so small. But let's say Uncle Kevin does a cannonball off the diving board, and now there's big splash and huge waves. You might even get knocked off your float. Right? So big changes often result in big anxiety in the system. What is your role in this? What is my role in this? Well, there's a couple options that we have here. Let's talk about the negative first. In order for anxiety to live in a system, it needs generators and it needs amplifiers. Generators are those people who stir up anxiety, and amplifiers are those people who make it bigger and louder and keep it going. Someone in the family comes to you and says, "Do you know what your sister did?" That is an anxiety-generating statement, isn't it? Someone at church comes to you and says, "I heard they're spending $10,000 to put a hot tub in the pastor's office. Can you believe that?" That is an anxiety-inducing statement, and that is someone who is generating anxiety. When there is anxiety in a system, one of the things we notice is this remark: people are saying. People are saying. People are out there saying they don't like this or they don't like that. People are out there saying they don't like you, right? People talk when there's anxiety in the system. And that is an incredibly challenging sentiment to deal with. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. How many of you have ever been a leader in a workplace or an organization or a family or any system? You've been a leader and someone has come to you and said, "You know, people are saying." How many of you have experienced that before? Isn't that incredibly difficult? You know why? Because you cannot do anything with anonymous comments. You cannot do anything with feedback that has no face and no name, and just maybe someone out there in the world feels this way, right? And so it is entirely destructive, and this is why at Timberlake we do not accept anonymous comments, and I'm encouraging you in your life, do not accept anonymous comments from anyone for any reason. Only accept comments with people's name attached, because the only way to solve a problem is relationally. Amen? If you work with someone, "Oh, you think this and I think this," well, let's work it out. And it's okay if we disagree, but let's put it on the table and let's work it out together. Friends, we call this murmurs, we call this rumblings, we call this hearsay. Let's call it what it really is. It's gossip. It is gossip. One of the things that immature people do when there's anxiety in the system is gossip. And it's understandable, because when we feel wound up, we want other people to feel what we feel, right? And we want to be justified. And so we project our fears and our anxiety onto other people and say, "Don't you agree with me? That's terrible." Right? Make me feel like I'm not crazy. Feel my feelings with me. And we project our anxiety onto other people by gossiping, by stirring things up. Friends, that is entirely destructive. Gossip does not actually do what you hope it to do and reduce the anxiety. You know what it does? It increases the anxiety. Gossip always increases the anxiety in the system. It leads to mistrust. It leads to misunderstanding. It leads to brokenness in relationships. Generators generate the anxiety, and amplifiers keep it going. Amplifiers feed into the anxiety. Like, "Oh, right. Yes, you're exactly right. The sky is falling. Yes, it's terrible." Or amplifiers blame someone. "Yep, it must be Jimmy's fault, definitely." Or amplifiers accept the anxiety without questioning it. If your friend says to you, "Oh, yes, dear, you are a victim," they're not being a very good friend to you. Amplifiers spread the anxiety around. "Oh, I heard it from so-and-so. Well, I got to tell these 3 people now," and keep it going, spread it around. Friends, you do not have to be a generator. And you do not have to be an amplifier. There are other options, and here are 2 options for you. Instead, you can be an interrupter, and you can be a peacemaker. Interrupters break the cycle of the spread of anxiety. In your house, when your kids were young and they would bicker and fight, and you wanted to stop it, now sometimes you just let it go. You're like, they'll figure it out. Like, one of them will be standing at the end of the day, right? But if you wanted to interrupt, what would you do? What would you do? Would you call their names? Would you make a big, what I do, I yell, right? "Hey!" Like that. You just get their attention, right? And it does. They stop what they're doing. Like, "Oh, okay, Dad's yelling. This is something," right? So you interrupt. You disrupt the system. You disrupt the process, the anxiety that they're putting on to one another. One of my social work professors from James Madison University, his name is Craig. And Craig, before he was a professor, he was a mental health counselor, a social worker. And one day, Craig got a call to come to this really intense situation, this sort of domestic situation in which a guy had barricaded himself in an office building, and he was threatening to hurt himself or someone else. And the building is now all surrounded by police, right? And they're ready to go in and flank him and throw in a concussion grenade and take him down with stun guns and tasers and all that stuff. But they thought maybe there's a more peaceful, less violent resolution to this situation. So they called in the social worker, right? So Craig walks in the room, and he said the guy in there was huge. This huge, hulking, scary-looking guy with a beard and a scowl on his face. And so Craig said, I looked around, and I saw right next to the desk was this trash can. And so I ran up to that trash can, and as hard as I could, boom, I kicked it all the way across the room. And it got the guy's attention, and he turned and looked at me, and he said, are you crazy? And Craig told him, well, I might be, brother. But I know this for sure, if you don't walk out of this building right now holding my hand, the cops are going to come in here and try to take you with guns. And so these two men who had met for 2 minutes on that day held hands, walked out of that building that day, and I'm confident Craig saved that man's life. Now see, he interrupted. He did something startling to break the tension, to break the anxiety in the room, to call the attention of the man to a more peaceful resolution. How can you be an interrupter of anxiety in this system? Friends, you have to speak. You have to speak back against that which is hurtful. You have to speak back against that which is false. When someone comes to you and they're gossiping and they're wound up and they're anxious and they say something that is false, you cannot simply sit there and nod your head and say, oh, okay, dear. You say, I love you. What you're saying is not true. Right? That's what you do. That's what you say. Now, you don't have to be harsh in the delivery of that. You can be gentle. You can be loving. But you must push back, friends. When someone is doing something to hurt the family, you don't just let it go. You take them aside and you say, I love you. What you are doing is not good. What you are doing is hurting the family. And then you talk about it. But you have interrupted. You have confronted and interrupted the system. When people come to you and they are insisting that the sky is falling and that everything is terrible, interrupt with a reminder about God's faithfulness. And someone says to you, oh, something terrible is going to happen. And you say, hasn't God been faithful to us so far? Well, yeah. Doesn't God promise to be with us no matter what? Well, yeah. Can't we reasonably assume, based on the Bible and our experience, that God is going to work with us through this thing also? Yeah. Interrupt by reminding about God's faithfulness. Be an interrupter, friends. Let me also invite you to be a peacemaker. Be a peacemaker. The world needs peacemakers. This church needs peacemakers. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. Notice there's a difference between a peacemaker and a peacemonger. Okay, you know what a peacemonger is? A peacemonger is someone whose own anxiety is driving them to try to create a sense of calm at any price. Right? And so this peace-mongering sounds like this. Please, everybody calm down. Right? Peace-mongering sounds like this. Hey, don't do anything to upset Dad, because you know how Dad gets when he's upset. So everyone just act like everything's fine. Peace-mongering sounds like this. Oh, don't offend the Smith family, because if you offend the Smith family, they'll definitely leave the church. And what would we do without the Smith family? Right? That's peace-mongering. Friends, that is the immature approach. Peace-mongering is when we prioritize this false sense of peace over everything else, including telling the truth, including doing what's right. On the other hand, peacemaking is less about our anxiety and more about the anxiety in the system. What can I do to address and bless others who are living with the uncertainty that we have right now in our family or in our office? It may feel like the sky is falling, but can I speak the truth that the evidence shows otherwise? You see, peacemakers understand the difference between thoughts and feelings, right? And anxiety lives here, and it also lives here. But when you can speak the truth into a difficult, tense situation, you can help reduce the anxiety. Peacemakers know the difference between thoughts and feelings. They also know the difference between themselves and others. And just because my brother or my sister is wound up doesn't mean I have to be, right? Just because my friend is angry doesn't mean I have to be. It's called self-differentiation. That's what counselors call it, that I am my own person. I don't have to feed into or feed off of the other person's emotional experience all the time. I can be my own person. In ministry, friends, we call this a non-anxious presence. A non-anxious presence. I'm inviting you to practice being a non-anxious presence. Have you ever walked into a family room or you walked into a hospital room and you can just feel the tension in the room? You know, something's not right. There's illness or there's argument or there's some kind of brokenness in the system. Who will be the peacemaker in that situation? Maybe it could be you. Maybe it could be you. But you got to practice this, friends. You got to practice. You know, when someone comes to me and says, Pastor, you know, something terrible is happening, what I really don't want to do is like freak out, right? Like, oh my gosh, that's the worst thing I ever heard that you just told me, right? That's not helping. I'm now increasing the anxiety instead of lowering it. So when someone comes to me and tells me something terrible, you know what I want to say? I want to say, I'm so sorry. I love you, and God loves you. Let's talk through this together. Can you tell me more about it? See the difference? I want to be a peacemaker. I want to speak peace. I want to help reduce the anxiety in the system. Friends, this is what it looks like to be a peacemaker. And let me suggest that your family needs peacemakers, and this church needs peacemakers. And I need your help. We've got to do this together. We've got to do this together. Last thing for today is this. One of my favorite teachers on the subject of anxiety is an author and a social worker named Brené Brown. How many of you have heard of Brené Brown? Excellent teaching on Netflix, on TED Talk. She has a good TED Talk out there. She also has books. She is so brilliant when it comes to these things, so vulnerable. And she also has a keen awareness of the role of the church, which I appreciate. And I don't know if she's a person of faith. I take it that she is. But she has a very clear awareness of the role of the church in dealing with these things. Her name is Brené Brown. Look at what she said about the role of the church in these things. She said, I went to church thinking that it would be like an epidural, that it would take the pain away. Wouldn't that be nice? But the church isn't like an epidural. It's like a midwife. I thought faith would say, I'll take away the pain and discomfort, but what it ended up saying was, I'll sit with you in it. Now see, that's the best of what Job's friends did for him, right? And that's the best of what we can do for each other, is to sit with our brothers and sisters in the pain, in the anxiety. They may be freaking out. You don't have to freak out. Friends, this church, your family, needs peacemakers. We serve the Lord of heaven and earth, who is the Prince of Peace. So go and do likewise. Amen.